Good day everyone, I hope you guys stay safe out there in the world right now. Today I want to share how I render my digital sculptures in Blender because it's really important to present your sculpture in a way where it's pleasant to look at, and most importantly it showcases the work that you've done. You don't want it to be too much light that it looks flat, or too much shadow that the viewers can't see the sculptures properly. I would say that this video is targeted for intermediate users, so I'm not gonna mention, for example, how to navigate the viewport or rotate an object, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of tutorial on YouTube on the basics of Blender's interface, so in this video I'm gonna assume that you understand at least the basics of Blender's UI. I will focus on trying to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing and kind of like the reason that I made behind my decision. Okay, so by the end of this video, hopefully you're gonna have kind of like a general setup where it showcases your sculptures consistently. So let's get this, guys. I created this model to study more about smile facial expression. The head is sculpted from scratch, and because the focus of the study is sculpting facial expression and not cloud sculpting, so I just put some Marvelous Designer simulation there for the outfit. Okay, so I created this model, right, and I spent lots of time on it, and I want to put it in my portfolio or share it in my ArtStation, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. I don't want to post only a viewport render. I mean, I can if I want, but it doesn't look good generally, at least in my preference. Don't get me wrong though, a viewport render can be good to be presented alongside the fully rendered image with actual lighting stuff, and I generally include viewport render or at least a screenshot of it in my ArtStation post, because viewport render shows kinda like the raw version of the model. So in this video, I'm gonna do lighting, shading or materials, rendering, and compositing, so that the image on the left, which is a viewport render, will looks like the image on the right, which is the final render. Alright, I'm using Blender version 2.83.4, and I'm just gonna do a little bit of user interface adjustment here and just kind of like cleaning up stuff that I don't really need. And I turn off the auto perspective setting because honestly I found it annoying, and then I turn on emulate numpad because I'm using laptops currently. So I'm just gonna append my finished model. So I like to use matcap for the viewport shading instead of the default studio lighting for the viewport. I'm just gonna delete the materials that this model has and replace it with new material, and then I'm gonna add new material to all the objects. You can select all the objects with A and use Ctrl L to make link to the materials, but in this case, for the eyeball, I have 5 different applied materials, and as you can see, the link function only replaced the first material, so I have to manually change each one for the eyeball. And next, I added a camera and set the focal length to 200mm. I tried to use 75mm to 135mm range, but I don't really like the look of it. So I'm just gonna eyeball it and go with my instinct on what looks better in this case. I set up the resolution to 1500 by 1200 for the sake of this video. It doesn't really need super high resolution. Next step is just placing the camera on where I want it to be. I split the viewport to 2 and then set the other one to shader editor. And then adjust the color of the material a bit. And then I change the world color to be pretty dark because I don't want too much environment lighting, and instead I want to focus on area lighting that I'm gonna show you in a second. Okay, I added an area light, and apparently I forgot to change the render engine to cycles, so I just switch it up to it. I haven't played around much with Eve because I'm not really into real-time rendering yet, but I will definitely do real-time artworks in the future. I changed the color management view transform to standard because I don't really need filmic in this specific case. I tried to use filmic and mess around with it, but for this scenario it doesn't give me the look that I want. But if you're rendering like hyper-realistic stuff, you should definitely use it. Okay, so I rotate the light 45 degree on local x-axis and also 45 degree from the face because it's such a balanced value to go from. When you're away from 45 degree on local x-axis of the light, like 50 or 60 or higher, it will start to make the model looks flat, and then if it's lower like 35 degree or lower, it will show too much shadowing, and generally not my preference when it comes to presenting my models. And the reason I rotate the light 45 degree from the face is it gives a nice balance between light and shadow, and the viewers will be able to read the face better. Now for the strength of the light, I want to make it just bright enough that the brightest point is not too bright because I'm gonna adjust it again later in the compositing. And for the size of the light, it really depends on what you want, you know. Obviously, the bigger the light, the more soft it will look, and the smaller the light, the more sharp it will look. Now in this case though, I actually want it to be soft enough because I like it in my taste for this artwork. And next is I duplicated the first light and then put it in front of the character with 70 degree on local x-axis, and this light is going to be act as the fill light so that the shadow isn't too dark, but I make it really low power because in this scenario I still want that shadow to be a little bit strong. And then lastly, I duplicated the light again and put it in the back of the character, and it's gonna be act as the backlight to separate the character from the background, and it gives that nice rim effect to the model. And in this case, I want the rim effect to be pretty soft, so the size of the light is not much different from the other light. And again, it depends on what you want. If you want it to be sharp rim effect, you can make it the light smaller. And I rotated the backlight to be 80 degree on local x-axis because I want the backlight to pointing a bit straight from the back, and it gives nicer rim effect in my opinion. Now I try to keep the light angled toward the face because it's the main focus of the artwork, You see, I changed the fill light to 50 degree on local x-axis because I feel like the previous value is a bit flat on the face. There is a saying where you want sharp lighting for male character and soft lighting for female character, and that's a good kind of like baseline, but you don't really have to follow that, you know. It really depends on the story, the mood that you want to portray, and how you want to present your character. Now, for the material for the head, I already created a vertex color data when I was sculpting the face, and it's basically just a black color highlighting the beard, the eyebrows, and the tear duct. So I mixed the vertex color data with the head color and make it low intensity, but it's still indicating a different color to the face. You see, I'm turning on the Node Wrangler add-on. I mean, this add-on should just be turned on by default, really. It's a super helpful add-on, and I use it most to preview the selected node by Ctrl Shift and click on the node. It's pretty cool. You can see that I mixed the vertex color data with multiply option because it's gonna try to only use the dark part of the vertex color and leave the bright part transparent. So when I mixed it, I can have the freedom to keep changing the actual head color. And you can see that I have the body and the head separated, so I created different material for the body, and it's just a simple principled BSDF with 0 metallic and 0.5 roughness. And most of the materials is gonna be just that with different shade of gray basically. I don't want to go too deep into material in this because it's just a sculpture showcase where the point is to show the actual shape and form of the model and not the shading quality. And the default principle BSDF is pretty good in this case. I also have a vertex color data in my eyeball model, and it's just a darker paint at the top of the eyeball to mimic the shadowing of the eyeball. And again, I mixed it with the color of the sclera, and for those who don't know, sclera is basically just a white part of the eyeball. And it's not really white actually, but whatever. It's that part of the eyeball where it's not the iris or the pupil. You know what I mean. And I like to keep my material color in sync with the viewport material display, and it's just to make it clear what's materials what. Now for the cloth material, I added a layer weight node and used the Fresnel output of it and use mix node with screen option so that it's going to try to use the white portion of the Fresnels only, and kind of like adding brighter color to the surface where it's facing away from the camera, and it gives that nice soft cloth effect. I mean, it's not really necessary in this sculpture rendering, but I want to give it a nice soft touch to the cloth, so I added it. And it just add a little bit of believability aspect to the cloth, and I changed the roughness to 0.8 specifically for the cloth because cloth is pretty diffused material. So, and I make the cloth color a bit darker because I want the viewers to focus more on the face. Okay, so now for the render properties, I set the render samples to 350, and then I turn off reflective and refractive caustic because I don't need them in this scenario, and I set the background to be transparent because I want to put a custom background later. And then I set the tiles to be 16 by 16 because I'm using CPU. And then for the output, I use PNG with color depth of 16 because I want more color range to the output. And then I set the compression to 90%. I also turn on the ambient occlusion pass because I want to use it later in the compositing stage. And lastly, I turn on the denoising. As I said before, that I have different materials applied to the eyeball, and this is how the different materials apply to the different regions of the eyeball model. So okay, let's try to render it. Well, that's a fast render thanks to the power of editing. So now I go to the compositing workspace, and first of all I want to mix the render image with the ambient occlusion pass. I can set the mix node to multiply so that it's using the dark part of the ambient occlusion pass, and I set the factor to be pretty low, like 0.3. And then I added an image node, and I want to open my already created background, and it's basically just a gray with soft bright gradient in the middle. And I mixed it with alpha over node, I scaled the background to match the size of the image using scale node. So I make the background a bit darker using the RGB curves node. And then make the rendered image a bit brighter so it's popped from the background. Now I bring up an RGB node and use it to make sure that the brightest point of the image is not too bright or too dark. Again, I like to organize my node placement, and it's not a bad thing. Alright, let's render it again and see how it looks. Okay, not bad, I think. Still needs a few adjustments here and there, but it's pretty good, I think. Let's compare it to my final one. My final one is a bit brighter, but I can always adjust it by going back to the compositor. Now at this point I can spend forever tweaking the value, but at some point I gotta call it done and move on. So yeah. You can save the image now by going to image, save as, choose your folder, rename it, and then save as image. And that's it, guys. So now it's just a matter of changing the value here and there, changing the material color, changing the light strength and size, that kind of stuff to make a different render scenario. As you can see with my renders here, they use a lot of the same principle. The additional workflow that I didn't show here is I use Photoshop sometimes to add a little tweak, like brightening the teeth, adding soft glow effect, film frame, just a small finishing touches like that. A lot of people probably wouldn't notice, but it still make a difference. So if you guys want more of this type of video where I share something that I learned over the years of learning 3D art, just let me know and I'll definitely deliver. Click like, share, comment, that would be really cool. And if you guys implementing something from this video in your artworks, I would like to see them. Don't be hesitate to contact me on Twitter at Yudit1999 and I will definitely check them out. So thank you very much and take it easy, guys.